Hey everybody, welcome back to DejaVue, your favorite Vue podcast out there. And today you might hear it, my host Michael is unfortunately not here. He lost his voice, but he'll be back next week. And of course, on all the other, or most of the other older episodes that you should check out if you haven't already. And of course, I wouldn't be here doing that podcast alone. It would be strange, but I got a lovely guest. He is, well, a Vue use maintainer among a lot of other libraries. Like the list is pretty long on the GitHub profile. And he's also the lead of the e18e initiative that we'll talk about a bit. Welcome, James Garbutt. James, how are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks for having me here. And yeah, it's an increasingly big list of things that I'm maintaining.
So tell a few more. I mean, okay, I mentioned Vue used, lead of e18e. They're like, I don't know, Bombshell, Chokidar. What else is on the list there?
So I maintain Pass 5 and Chai as well. And it's quite a lot of the libraries that I do maintain are more granular level, in that it's all the building blocks of other frameworks and tools, basically.
So the typical problem, like people use them, but people don't know about them.
Yeah, exactly. Especially Chokidar, for example. Like, most projects that need to watch files will use Chokidar. And you're not necessarily aware that it's a dependency in your tree, to be honest. But it's such a fundamental package. And yet it's probably the least known one that I maintain.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, of course, like being a Nuxt team and Nuxt using Chokidar, I've heard it multiple times. We looked into some issues with watchers, how to use them more efficiently and so on and so on. But true, I would say out there, people might be like, maybe heard the name, but yeah, they will definitely find it in their dependency list if they do like, I don't know, a PNPMY Chokidar.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it's probably the same with Pass 5 in quite a lot of things, just because anything that parses HTML, linters and formatters and tools like that, they have to pull it from somewhere. And there's only, maybe a handful of parsers out there. So it's probably somewhere in the dependency tree.
Most likely, indeed. But before we dive into like the big topic, E18E, maybe let's rewind a little bit and maybe start with your journey into like programming, web development. So how did you get into all of that eventually?
Yeah, long time ago. From what I remember, I was writing web scrapers when I was a teenager.
Oh, nice.
I think I wrote an IMDb web scraper or something just for sake of getting movie info and things. I think I was writing, a few other scrapers for things around the time. And then I started contributing to some PHP projects as well, which I've thankfully forgotten.
But was the scraper in PHP as well back then, or?
Some of them were, yeah, because this is before Scrapey and everything existed, obviously, in Python. So, yeah, quite a lot of it was written in PHP. And then I gradually moved on to the front-end side of things where, it paired well at the time. I was doing the back-end in PHP and the front-end in JavaScript. And then started focusing more on the front-end libraries and things like that. And then that's where I started getting into GitHub projects and things. So you can see like way back in my repositories, I got bored one day and made like a RAR implementation, like WinRAR in JavaScript.
Oh, wow. Why?
Just to see if it was possible.
Just for the sake of it. Yeah, okay, fair.
It did get featured on a blog post that was something like libraries you should never write in JavaScript.
I can imagine. But on the other hand, everything that you can write in JavaScript will be written in JavaScript nowadays.
Pretty much, yeah. Just to prove that it's possible. A bit like the Doom stuff going on recently.
Oh, so good. Yeah, man. Dimitri is like, that was insane to see. Also, like beyond, I don't know, Flappy Bird and TypeScript, where like, okay, there was a parser in Zig, I think, and all that. And where Dimitri was like, no, not like that. We'll do it differently. Like, actually, it is mind-blowing. Link in the show notes, by the way, for everybody who hasn't heard. Yeah, TypeScript, Doom and TypeScript is a thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. But seeing any project like that is really cool because it's, it's a proper hobby project, as in nobody needed it. It's just to prove that you can build something like that. And it's the same with RAR.js and, anything else people have built that is not necessarily a requirement. It's just something fun, right?
True. And that also means like you can steer the direction, you can do whatever you feel like, no pressure. But when it's done, you're like, hey, it's cool. It works now. It does what it should. And it's a fun project indeed.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So from that and like adventuring through PHP, eventually ending to JavaScript, how did you get into like using a bit of Vue.js? I mean, of course, you use different frameworks and maybe also not at all. How did that happen?
Yeah, so for a long time, I was in the web components community, contributing quite a lot to Lit Element, which is the Google sort of web components library. And it's from the point of view of building components and things, Vue is very similar. And so is Svelte and a few other things. You're always building from the component level and using those building blocks to create a project. So as part of like the learning experience of making sure I don't end up in just a web components bubble, occasionally I would go out and just try out some framework or some other library or something. One day I thought, oh, okay, well, let's do some Vue, because why not? It's a very similar concept, even if it's not built the same. And ended up getting interested in that, and then sort of just contributing here and there some fixes and stuff. But I know a few people that work on Vue use, for example, through the e18e side of things as well. And just from pushing fixes and things. And that's where I became a maintainer of that. But then also the Vite side of things, quite a lot of the Vite folks are in the e18e community and help run it in some cases. So yeah, just over several years, I've got more and more into Vue.
Very nice, very nice. But I also want to highlight one thing you said here, because you said, okay, to not end up in a bubble, in your case, the web component bubble, you would like try out other things here and there. Would you say this is something more people should do, no matter what like framework or stack they use?
Yeah, I think so. An example recently is I'll be going to Svelte Summit later this year, and just to make sure that I get back on top of knowing a little bit of Svelte, I decided to go read through some of the repos and stuff, and try some out, do an example, contribute a few fixes, and just see where that goes. And then at least you've refreshed your knowledge or got some new knowledge. But yeah, it's very easy to end up in a little pocket where the only thing you know is Vue or React or some other thing. And maybe that's okay because that's what your job uses. But, me personally, I like the idea of just delving into something totally different every now and then, just to see if, is there something there that you would enjoy using? Or just to make sure you're not stuck in a little hole.
Yeah, also to broaden the horizon, or maybe even see some concepts that you think, how could I do that in the framework of my choice? What's the option there? Why is it, I don't know, easier or more difficult, and so on as well?
Yeah, 100%. And, you can see this happening where collaboration happens a lot more across frameworks, like Signals, for example. It's probably Solid that started that off, and everybody has sort of collaborated on the concept now. So people are able to switch frameworks quite often because roughly the same pattern is used in quite a lot of them now. So it's a really good way of making sure you learn, multiple patterns, especially.
Agreed, yeah. And I mean, Signals is such a good example of like framework convergence, where like a lot of modern frameworks basically said, okay, this is the way to go. Solid and especially Ryan there paved the way. And even though the syntax or like how to write Signals is not the same in like Angular, Preact, or Solid, or Svelte with runes, or also Vue with refs or shallow ref if you don't want to have deep reactivity, you can still take a lot of what you know already over. It's like, okay, then I write different here. Here, this is how the getter and setter looks like. Or I don't need them. I can just mutate them straight away. So, but the core concept in a way stays the same.
Pretty much, yeah. And, going back to the web components example, I was writing lit components for years. And, they actually look structurally pretty similar to quite a lot of other libraries and frameworks. So it's not too difficult to move between them because, most people settle on similar patterns. And you can probably say the same with Svelte and Vue. There's a lot of similarities just in the syntax.
Definitely,
that you should be able to switch over without much of a learning curve because you already learned how to deal with components in that way.
No, agreed. And I think that It gets more tricky on the meta framework level where like, I don't know, SvelteKit and Nuxt might be a bit more different than like say Svelte and Vue, or same with a lot of other frameworks in their meta frameworks. Though maybe then we all see a bit of convergence here when it comes to Nitro, for example, with like Analog and Solid Start, 10-stack Start and so on, all using Nitro under the hood.
Yeah, that's true. And I also became a maintainer of Vue.js.
Congrats, nice.
Just reminded me of that one, yeah. Which is used inside Nitro. But yeah, Nitro is a really good one because it should be joining a lot of the frameworks, just like Vite did, really. So that you have one common stack between them, basically.
That would be ideal, yeah. Like Vite, let's say for everything, quote unquote, on the front with like, okay, we of course do all the bundling, we do the dev server, we have like HMR and everything, and then Nitro for everything like backend related with like, I don't know, server functions and I don't know, different patterns of generating and so on. So yeah, right now this looks like where we're heading.
Yeah, 100%. And there's no point duplicating all of that work. Like if these frameworks can all collaborate on creating a common set of building blocks at least, then it's going to save everybody time. So I think it's a really cool project, but see where it goes, to be honest.
Yeah, also really, really curious how that will turn out eventually. And you already said it, like we do basically people from a lot of different backgrounds and also frameworks work together. We see it on Vite, we see it on Nitro, but we also see that in e18e. Now, e18e as a numeronym sounds a bit cryptic, of course, if you say the first time like A11Y, I18N, and so on. But these are, of course, more common to most developers. So what is e18e and what does it stand for?
Yeah, it stands for Ecosystem Performance. And basically, born out of a long time ago, people realizing that quite a lot of dependency trees have a lot of bloat in JavaScript, especially. So not only like unmaintained packages, but maybe duplicate versions of packages where you've got multiple versions and maybe like different packages which achieve the same thing. And so, long ago, I was trying to chip away at this and clean up some of the dependency trees, but just by myself creating pull requests all over the place. And then it sort of came from a Twitter thread, I think, originally, where Bjorn, who's, well, like the name we'll put in the notes, I guess. But
yes, Bjorn Liu, yes.
Bjorn was working on Astro, I think, at the time, improving Astro build times.
Right, exactly.
I think Anthony was working on improving Vite build times or something like that. But the group of us came together and realized, well, hold on, we're all trying to make tooling and frameworks and things like that a lot faster and lighter. So maybe we should create at least a space to discuss this. And that's when we created the Discord server, which, then E18e came out of that. And then we created a website, made a blog, all the usual stuff, and then started getting more and more people involved. And then, eventually we got organizations like Storybook, for example. The Storybook people have worked with us quite a lot to reduce their dependency trees and things, and the Vite team and Astro and Svelte. So, yeah, over time, like, everybody is getting involved. But the whole point of it is to improve performance, basically, of the things we all use in our stacks. So that could be developer tooling, or it could be the runtime libraries, or framework tools, things like that. But it could be anything. It's like a community initiative. We're not the people doing all of these PRs. We're sort of just making them more visible a lot of the time so that people can help. But it seems to be going well so far. So
oh, absolutely. I mean, the name is all around and everywhere, which is, I think, a great sign that people care about performance, and not only in their applications, but also regarding their dependencies and the ecosystem, as the name says. So timeline-wise, just to get that roughly right, when was the Discord and the website and the blog post created? Because I remember, like, when I've seen Anthony last year in Bordeaux for like our Nuxt team meeting, he was like scribbling the logo of E18e. So it was like in, I think, summer or so. And I was like, okay, that will be fun.
Yeah. So I think it was the start of 2024, maybe like early 2024, but I'll have to double check that. But it, at the beginning, it was a very small group of us. It was basically like 6 people maybe, because we also had Marvin in there for a short time who wrote the speeding up the ecosystem.
Yeah, Marvin Hagemeister also doing amazing job all around the ecosystem. Links to his blog posts, of course, down in the show notes.
Exactly. And we had Puya, which he's doing un.js, which has quite a lot of focused utilities. So it crosses over in that he's trying to create lightweight, focused things that work across all platforms. And these are a lot faster and smaller in most cases than all the, older alternatives. So people like that were involved from the start. And we sort of just bounced ideas around. So a year and a half ago now, I guess, to figure out like, what's the purpose of this community? What should we be doing?
Yes.
And ultimately, we came up with the categories that we have now on the website, which is cleanup, which is basically, reducing dependency trees and removing unmaintained packages and things like that. And then we have speed up, which is contributing to fundamental tools and popular packages, performance improvements. And then we have level up, which is basically producing new packages most of the time, which are sort of lighter alternatives to much older full fat packages. Because, in that the last case is a more opinionated one in that we're not necessarily replacing the packages, because some repos still need the feature-rich package. But quite a lot don't, they only use a small part of the functionality. So in those cases, there should be a lighter alternative, and that's kind of what the gap we're trying to fill. But yeah, those areas, we basically have ongoing work in all 3 of them now, which is across most frameworks and tools. There's a PR somewhere that someone's working on.
That's amazing. So you also said basically these 3 pillars on the website, they are basically pillars of the ecosystem performance itself. So from reducing dependencies, which means, well, less code that might be emitted after build, and also less bandwidth to use as well. Then the speed up part, is that really related to what, for example, Bjorn and Marvin do, especially like, I don't know, reduce build times or like compile times or similar?
Yeah, pretty much. So a good example of some of this stuff is using the Ox compiler, like the resolver, inside build tools which previously used the resolve package. It's a lot faster. So if we can pull that into a lot of tools, then obviously the dev tools get faster, the CI builds get faster, we can ship faster, we can run tests faster, and so on. So it's not always an end user thing, is my point as well. But we also do contribute to end user libraries, which will be runtime code we've improved. So it could be anything really. It's just if someone notices a slow package, then we'll contribute and start doing investigation work to look through CPU profiles and things like that, to figure out how to speed it up.
I see. Okay. Let's say someone wants to contribute, so to say, or like someone or a few things, okay, there might be an opportunity somewhere. How do you first of all like identify, let's say, areas of improvement in the ecosystem? Because of course there are a lot, and like, I'm not exaggerating, of course there are tons of areas, but how do you get started of like, okay, that might be a good way to improve. Here are some dependencies that can be cut, or here's like basically seconds that we can reduce to milliseconds.
Yeah, so it can be tackled from either end, really. So if you think about it, there's the deep end of this where you can improve the deep dependencies that all of us depend on without knowing. And if you make those faster and smaller, then obviously a lot of tools will eventually pull the new version in, and they'll be faster and they'll be smaller and so on. And you can also tackle it from the other end, where it's, take a framework, for example. We will investigate like the framework tooling or something, see how fast it is, how much memory it uses, or how big it is, and contribute to that. But either way, we have like a issues repository in the e18e org on GitHub, which basically has like a long list of meta issues. So, like someone may have opened an issue saying, this is the umbrella issue for Storybook, and we keep track of all the related issues in there, of things that we've noticed that we could improve. So if someone wants to get involved, like you can just go to the issues repo that we have and look at one that hasn't been picked up yet. And it should be explained well enough that you can literally get started today on it. But, there's also unknowns. We need people to create more issues. So stuff like that, just hop on the Discord and, let us know what you want to look into, and we'll help you, and we'll do some investigation work, create some issues, get people involved.
That sounds good. Yeah, so people definitely join a Discord also for that link in description /show notes, and get involved, because what are the prerequisites, so to say? If someone says, I want to do something, I want to get involved, do you need like any specific knowledge? Do you need to be like a performance pro?
No, not really. Like, a big point in this existing is to introduce more people to contributions as well. Because if you think about it, like one of the big gains, for example, from this is that people building new packages which are faster and smaller than existing ones in the past struggled to get those packages adopted, because there's this whole thing of, oh, well, this one's been around for 10 years and it's got 40 million downloads, let's use that one. But now that we have a whole community behind these people, we're giving people the opportunity to get their package into wide usage and stuff. So it's opening the door for a lot more new contributors. So you don't really need to know anything, if within reason. But if you come along to the Discord especially and just take part in the discussions, someone will raise something at some point, and anyone's allowed to chip in and just say, can I help out? And almost everything is done as a pair or a group, at least, as in there's more than one person involved. So it's not often that you would just be doing it solo. That's why we have a community for this.
Totally makes sense. And it also means, are there like issues tagged as like, I don't know, good first issues, especially for people who maybe have never contributed before, or like are there people designated to help? Except, of course, the whole community is there to help, but do you have like a specific flow there?
Yeah, so most of the issues are labeled fairly well in that I can't remember them all by my memory, but
of course.
There's a couple where, for example, it needs first contact, and this is where we've probably identified that there's a possible performance improvement in some repo. But obviously, step one is to talk to the maintainers of that repo and make sure that they're open to contributions for it. And even something like that, we still need someone to go create the issue on their end and ask if they're up for contributions. And that's a contribution, creating the issue. And if they say yes, then, the next step is to contribute the fixes that we've come up with. So all these issues should be labeled pretty well like that in the e18e repo. And some will already have that, and there'll just be a list of more granular issues, and you can pick one up. So, yeah, like just browse around the issues repo, and there's plenty in there. But also, if you just use some tools that you think, oh, well, this should be faster, bring it up and we'll investigate it together. And more than likely, there is a way to make it faster. Most things can be improved.
Oh yeah, I'm more than sure about that, especially in the JavaScript world. That's almost always a given.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
When we come to these improvements, like what are the biggest, let's say, ripple effects you've seen? Especially as you mentioned before, maybe improving the speed of like a library that's used by so many other dependencies that are then used in frameworks or bigger tools. I'm curious, what's your experience there? Anything was like that was really surprising or that was breathtaking to see how that unfolded eventually?
Yeah, there's a couple of examples. Like the most recent one actually is the mini zlib library, which went from something like 2.7 mega, I think it was, to 300 kilobytes or something.
Wow.
And
okay. Crazy.
This was trimming away some unused dependencies, basically. But that is used by, earlier I explained that you can tackle it from the deep end of the dependency tree. This is an example of that, where it's a very deep dependency that most of us don't know about. But that is pulled in by a package called tar. And tar is used by many, many tools to deal with tar files, obviously. And like once they pull the update in, they will drop 2 meg of storage. So, stuff like that will bubble up gradually over time. And then popular tools that you do install will see that saving. And it's not only the size, like in a lot of these cases, by removing some dependencies and using native functionality, for example, it speeds it up as well.
True. Best code is no code.
Yeah, exactly. So at runtime and install time, it can be faster just by modernizing things a lot of the time. And the other example that goes around a lot is the storybook dependency tree. And there's a screenshot somewhere that I don't have at hand, but
we'll put it we'll link it if you haven't seen it. Yes.
And it's basically a big dependency tree of Storybook going down to something that's like 4 packages or something. And they've done great work reducing that over time. So anything like that, it has a massive impact on all the build tools we use and things. So the more of that we see, the smaller like the stack will get, which is good.
Agreed. Yeah, fully true. We have so many modules out there, which is already crazy. I mean, more than any other, package managing system, like, Maven or what Python has with pip and so on. I wonder one or two things that you mentioned. For example, are you also then helping other tools to migrate to a newer version, let's say, that has these like performance benefits? Are these then once again issues linked in the e18e repository or like the issues repo that people can tackle?
Yeah, so generally we have tracking issues for updating packages as well. So sometimes it's in the same issue as, fixing the package. Sometimes it's a separate issue, but generally we try go end to end where, let's say we have improved a package to be really small or something. The issue isn't complete until we've started migrating projects to that as well. So it is a long job in a lot of cases, but otherwise, it would take a very long time to get adopted because not everyone would update or even know there's a new version. So, yeah, quite often some of the work is just letting people know. You don't even have to do the update yourself, just making it more known that there is a new version and it'll save you this much CPU time or size or whatever. And then maintainers themselves can do the move. But yeah, increasing like visibility of stuff like that is a big thing that we're trying to focus on. And it's it's the same with migrations to other tools. If there's a tool that's deprecated or unmaintained or something, we have the module replacements repo, which is to try document, don't use this thing, use this thing.
Perfect.
And there's just a giant list of stuff to switch from A to B, and a lint plugin as well, which helps you detect that stuff.
I just want to ask that as well. Yeah, if there's like a lint plugin, it's even better. That's more people should use that, it sounds like.
Yeah, like we are working at the minute as well on a CLI that can do some of this stuff so that you don't need ESLint to do it necessarily. Because there's quite a lot of projects that want to, make use of these lint checks basically, but don't use ESLint.
Yeah, like Biome, OXLint, and so on. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Or you want to run it in CI or something as just a check. So, there's ongoing work to create a CLI there, which will probably tie in a fair bit to the Node modules inspector that Anthony made, which is also a really cool little web app.
True.
If you haven't seen that, go to it. It's really good.
Also, link in the description for all the good things. I feel like there will be a lot of links in there today. Like, it's really nice just to see, okay, what's actually installed, and it's actually doing that, right? Like it's actually fetching all the dependencies of dependencies.
Yeah, so it installs it in a container in your browser, just using npm or pnpm, and just inspects the dependency tree. But, he recently integrated Publint as well, which is a really cool tool by Bjorn that basically lints that you've published the package correctly. So it'll tell you things like, oh, you've forgot this in your package.json, or there's a broken export or something like that. And, all of this is coming together in this one tool that we're working on. So the idea is all those different checks and like, are the types wrong is another tool. Anything like that, there should be like one umbrella CLI that can just tell you like these things are warnings or whatever.
Is there any like open repository for that already, or like where people can follow the progress on that?
Not quite yet, but there will be one very soon.
Perfect. As soon as you have the link also there, we'll drop it in. Maybe we can do it until the release, or maybe afterwards, then we'll edit it later on. I'm wondering, when especially mentioned, for example, replacing packages or upgrading major versions, how do you think about backwards compatibility? So for example, like supporting older Node versions, and then, well, we could trim the package by a lot by just saying, okay, we, as you said before, replace it with maybe existing native methods. So how does that usually work, considering that maybe people, well, are not on the newest Node version that provides that?
Yeah, so basically I would say that there's always going to be some projects that do need to support older Node. And so, we're not trying to get rid of the packages that have that support. We're just providing an alternative for people that don't need to support older Node. Because, I don't know what percentage, but let's say it was half and half. That would mean that half of the people installing this one that supports like Node 1 or something don't need it to support that. They'd happily have it support Node 18 and above or something. So if we at least make sure there's a choice, then all the people that do need to support older Node can carry on using the packages that are staying that way. And then the people that are happy to require Node 18 or something can move to the alternatives. You should be able to have multiple choices. We should support both ends of it, basically.
Agreed. Yeah, especially because, for example, if you say you bump a major, like bring out a new major version of a package, not even alternative, but just a new major version, the old major versions are still there, the old versions in general, so people can rely on them if they need like the compatibility with the older node.
That's true, yeah. And, you look at one of the things we blogged about recently was the ES modules migration. And now that you can require an ES module in Node 20 and above, quite a lot of packages that we worked with recently published new major versions which require Node 20 and above, basically, if you want to use require. But then if you use ES modules, it's 18 and above, basically. But yeah, in those cases, those packages happily made a new major because you can still install the old version if you need like older Node. And most of those packages basically settled on features in that they're not going to change the API anytime soon. So it's like they'll happily backport fixes and stuff, but the latest version will be a lot like more modern. So yeah, that's a good example of where, we should be happy to create new major versions, really.
As long as the features are also backported, I guess, to make sure other people like who can't use the newest Node version can still have support for new things. Or do you think, like, where do you think you'd make the cutoff point? Like, it also depends on the library, of course, but if you say, okay, new major version, you all have to upgrade or bad luck, versus where you would backport things.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because it changes per package, obviously. So, for example, we moved quite a few ESLint plugins to ES modules only recently, and for those, they already required ESLint 8, and 8 and 9 have flat config support, I think. So you would basically be fine if you're already using a flat config, which is just a config that's an ES module. But if you're using an old school config like an ESLint RC file, then we would probably just say carry on using the old version and just assume that the old version is tied to that. And, if you want the new features, upgrade to flat configs and then you're fine. I think that should be fine because, again, most of these packages are working fine as is anyway. So these, like, if you want the new features, it's just an upgrade process, isn't it? And the migration's not usually that bad. Like, especially in ESLint, you can have an MJS file for your config while still being in a CommonJS repo.
Then should be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, like if you have a few dependencies that are then not supported or like have some issues with newer Node versions, then you're kind of trapped. Like I think we all know that problem where like you would like to upgrade, but maybe that's the thing, or the platform you're running on doesn't support it or whatsoever. Like I've seen various, let's say, good excuses or actually like good reasons that people would like to upgrade but can't. But it's also, I think, the like 0 point something percent in there then.
And as long as you're not breaking the versions they're on, then
important.
It should in theory be fine.
Agreed. Yes. So they can stay on there. If they want new things, then the way is upgrading in a way.
Yeah.
True.
And yeah, like the replacement packages, for example, when we make a replacement, we would just tell people stay on the other package until you're ready. You don't need to switch. You've got the functionality you need. You can get the performance improvements once you are able to upgrade. Well, not upgrade, but switch over.
Makes sense. Yeah. First make it work and then see when you can improve things. Agreed. In terms of replacement packages, do you have a good example for like a replacement package that's out there that's maybe well known for a certain other one, like so people can imagine how it would look like?
Yeah, so there's a couple of examples that like solve things different ways. So one example is there's the nxt.js package. There's an alternative called nano-staged, and it's a lot smaller, but it does exactly the same job. So in that case, like it's a really easy switch, and you keep the same functionality basically.
So it's really drop in. So like, okay, you can just change the package name or alias it even if you want to, and it just works.
Yeah, and that's similar with in npm scripts. Quite often you'll see like npm run all, and npm run all isn't maintained from what I remember. So there's an npm run all too, which
I see, yeah,
is maintained but is also a lot smaller and more modern. And you literally just change the package you've installed and it has the same binaries, so your scripts stay the same. But yeah, an example where it's not like that, where it's a code dependency, is something like, again, the ESLint plugins are a good one, where if you don't need to support really old Node versions, there's the ESLint import plugin, which does support old Node versions, but you can switch to the ESLint plugin import X, I think it's called, which is basically just a fork where it's much lighter and it's faster, and it supports more modern exports and things. If you can switch over and you don't need to support old Node, then you might as well. But the functionality, like the same lint rules exist. All the configs should roughly be the same. It should just be that you switch the dependency, maybe fix up some configs, and then it's faster. So yeah, stuff like that. If we produce an alternative, it should be easy to migrate. And like the big example actually that I totally forgot was tinyglobby.
I was waiting a bit for that, yes. I've seen it all over the place in various libraries.
Yeah, so tinyglobby is built on top of FDIR or FDIR. It's that's a very fast file system crawler kind of thing. And then tinyglobby is built on top of that to provide glob support. But yeah, it's super light and it's much faster. So we've seen crazy adoption of that over the last year, let's say, to where it's got like many millions of downloads now. So stuff like that, the API is almost the same as the other glob libraries it's replacing. So in most cases, it's a really easy switch. But again, not all repos should switch because they genuinely do want to support older versions of Node, or in this case, they want to support some more obscure glob patterns that tinyglobby doesn't support. Just things like that. So it depends on your project, obviously.
But that, for example, tinyglobby doesn't support it is a deliberate choice, so it doesn't blow up the package size, for example, or introduces another dependency that most people don't need.
Yeah, so basically there's quite a few glob libraries floating around, and they all roughly implement bash globs, but slightly different. Different levels of support.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty obscure patterns that not many people use in the wild. But, if you've got a use for that, like there's certain packages that are much bigger to support that. So tinyglobby and a few other libraries are actually smaller in some cases because they don't support these extreme patterns. But to be honest, it does support most patterns from what I've seen. So it should just be a fairly simple switch. And, the maintainers are very active, so they update anyway when someone finds, an extra feature that would be nice to have or something. But importantly, keeping it small.
Yes, no, the feature creep can't come in here. I also understand that.
Yeah.
And there are always trade-offs in the end, right? And I think like you highlighted it very well in the past, like half an hour or almost 45 minutes, to say like, okay, there are cases where it might make sense to support all the node versions, then use the package that's out there. But for like the happy cases, the big majority, that might not be the case. So it's better to like rely on a more modern alternative, but you have the choice.
Yeah, and like you were asking, sometimes it makes sense to drop some functionality to gain performance. What we've seen quite a lot in many packages is that not only the size, but they're often slow because they're accounting for something that nobody really uses in the wild, or maybe like a small number of people do. So, an example of this is we're working on the new Prettier CLI, and one of the slowdowns Prettier has is that you're allowed to override the config at any level. So every directory it goes into, it has to check if there's a config file, and obviously there's multiple possible formats, so it has to check all of them. And in reality, like most usages we've seen have one config file, and if you could just say, just use this one and don't look for other ones, you would save seconds of time, in a format run.
Of course, like with ESLint, like, I don't know, root true of like, hey, this is the end. You don't have to check further. Here we are. Take that.
Exactly,
so,
yeah.
There's also a good example of like runtime improvement. Like actually, okay, that's, as I said before, Prettier. Like it's a tool a lot of people out there are using. What else is better to just give them free performance right out of the box and still enabling them to say, okay, they have the setup where you have like nested rules because of, well, their requirements, then they can still use it and have to configure something differently.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, we see that in quite a lot of libraries where you can improve the speed of it, like the CPU performance, just by dropping some features. In Chokidar, we dropped glob support. It's faster and much smaller now. But, some people do need globs for Chokidar, so we're working on that as well now. But it would be a separate thing that you install because the majority don't need globs. Mm-hmm. So by not having it in core, it's a much faster and smaller library. And then if you do need it, you can install it separately. That's the idea.
Yeah, so like a bit what frameworks also do, like keeping the core lean and then making sure to have some kind of, I don't know, modular architecture, or just saying, here's an addition, you can install it, it will be available, and there you go.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And if we see more architecture like that, then a lot of tools and packages will get a lot faster, because the happy path, like you say, the main use case of it would be like concise and really fast. Then at that point, it'd be optimized, and all the extra stuff you pull in if you need it. So I'd love to see that pattern in more packages in the wild.
True. Maybe it's also a good candidate for like an e18e blog post, if that doesn't exist already, to like maybe just share, hey, this could be a future also for the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, let's see when it will come out then.
Yeah.
Do you have any other like patterns in mind, like that one, that's basically either could like be good to improve performance, or pattern that you see that are rather problematic for performance that you would suggest not to use?
I think so it's not really a code pattern, but I would say being more observant of your dependencies is a major thing that we should push for. Because, if you're aware of what a dependency pulls in, that will help you decide which package you choose in a set of choices, because they may pull in a package that you already have in your tree. And so NPM will be able to dedupe it. Whereas if you just don't care, you'll end up with a lot of packages that do the same thing, at the deep level. And then it's just bloat, isn't it? And so if people become more observant of like what you're actually installing, and that's where the node modules inspector is useful, then you can dedupe all of that stuff and just reduce a lot of clutter, basically. So yeah, I would recommend people doing that more often. And even if it's a really small package, it's just to get you into the habit of actually looking and reviewing it, see what you can find.
I think that would be a good practice, but I guess it's also very impractical given the multitude of packages you usually install in a bigger project.
Yeah, hopefully we can solve some of that with this CLI.
True. Then you can just run through and say like, okay, look here, or maybe even suggesting, hey, you use that package already. Maybe there's a better dependency that does the same and already reuses some dependencies, some other ones.
Yeah.
That could be interesting. Yeah. Another way that might work is also like maybe leveraging that in tools directly, like Vue, having some kind of like, I mean, we already can like have bundle inspection, seeing that, but even beyond that.
Yeah. Like quite a lot of dependencies could be, forcefully deduped through overrides and stuff as well. Because you can quite often end up with actually in Vue, you can end up with bundled dependencies, for example.
Yeah.
Where you're not actually deduping because it's in a bundle somewhere. And we have a post about this on the blog. Because sometimes it does make sense in the case of Vue to bundle some of its dependencies, but then in other tools it doesn't make sense.
That's also a really good one. I definitely also linked below. We had it for example, for nuxt.js that we decided to bundle some. And then we said like, okay, look, let's try it out without it. And of course, we got it not only smaller, but also if you use the CLI directly with Nuxt, then, well, it's also faster because it doesn't have to execute this like for the bundle itself and then for the start command separately.
Yeah, 100%. So it's a balancing act, though, because sometimes it does make sense to bundle things. That ultimately you should be able to have a really lean dependency tree without bundling if all packages were perfectly focused and sized correctly and all this, but it's not true, obviously. And so there's quite a few dependencies where you'll only use a small part of them. And so in those cases, sometimes it does make sense to bundle it because you're only pulling one function in, let's say. But if you use like most of a package, then just make it a regular dependency because you're going to pull it in anyway. And that's kind of the balance where tools like Vue have to make the decision, which one to pull in and which one not.
In terms of bundling, maybe this is also good for the listeners or viewers in there, because bundling is also meant as, of course, like we have the bundle of our application, we put all dependencies in there. Maybe it's good to explain maybe also what dependency inlining is for people not aware of that.
Yeah, so there's quite a few dependencies where like it's a package that's too granular. It's a micro package, we call it, where you might as well do it in your code inline. And an example of this is the infamous isNumber package.
Classic, yes.
Where
or isEven or isOdd, all of them.
I think isEven actually depends on isOdd and just.
Or the other way around, yeah. And isNumber up, it's fun.
Yeah, the isNumber package does actually have a use, but it's not what you think, and so. In reality, like most people shouldn't be using it. Most people should just use type of some variable is number, and that's fine. And so you should certainly inline that code basically instead of using the package. And there are few cases where it is actually needed, then use the package, fine. But they may be few enough that you just put it in a module in the repo that needs it. Because again, it's probably not that many packages that need that. But you can also automate some of this, like when you put, like Vue, for example, publish bundled files to NPM. So they're just inlining entire tree shaken dependencies. But, again, that's because they only use a small part of those dependencies. So it doesn't make sense to pull the whole thing in to get like a 2-line function out of it or something. So yeah, there's those two ways of sort of inlining stuff.
And of course, the benefit of inlining would say like you wouldn't have to download the big package just to get like a 2-line function out there, or like, I don't know, 10 lines. But on the other hand, it also means deduplication doesn't really work then, because if there's another dependency, let's say from yourself or the framework that's the same package, it will be downloaded, and the code that Vite has will also be downloaded, obviously. So we have like 1 and a bit times the package.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, it's a difficult balance. And so Vite, for example, is gradually moving some dependencies back out of the bundle to be normal dependencies. But yeah, it'll depend like how much of those they use, and the ones that they move out then can be deduped because they're used in other dependencies that you have and other tools and things. So it is a difficult decision, but there's a tough balance there, and the Vite team are trying to do a little bit of that. And Storybook as well do quite a lot of it. Because Storybook, for example, bundle quite a lot of their dependencies, but quite a lot are internal as well. So, like Storybook itself in the mono repo has various Storybook packages that you wouldn't install, but they're pulled in as part of the package you would install. So in those cases, it makes sense to bundle it, because you're only going to pull it in as a dependency of Storybook. No one else is going to depend on it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Now, looking a little bit ahead, now we have, we're officially now in Q2 of 2025. What is on the horizon for e18e this year, besides the CLI you're working on? Anything else you can share that's maybe exciting, or some foreshadowing?
Yeah, so we're trying to focus quite a bit more on collaborations with like organizations, not only companies, but like GitHub organizations, where we can have a closer relationship and help out contributing to their repos. So, like recently we started collaborating with Netlify. Netlify are doing a big cleanup of their CLI at the minute. And, some of the community are interested in that. So we're collaborating to work together on that. We're doing the new Prettier CLI, as I mentioned earlier. We're also working on a few things in the e18e repo, just minor cleanup stuff. Doing the CLI that I mentioned. At some point, we will make Chokidar globs kind of library of some sort once we figure out what it should be. And yeah, there's just various organizations wanting to get involved, wanting to help us out as well. And I think like we're going to start doing more blog posts as well to, showcase some of this stuff, because not all of it's that visible. It's just scattered around issues and Discord chats, basically.
Yeah, I think that's like a key part of just like raising the awareness, and also, of course, not only showing, hey, this is what we did, and here's why that amazing, the benefits of it, but also, of course, as you just mentioned, what can people installing dependencies do, or what can people want to contribute to? For that, though, you have already some good stuff in place.
Yeah, and we're continuing a lot of work as well, like the ES modules migration. We will carry on helping projects out moving to ES modules only, because that's like a long task. There's so many packages, but we'll be there to help if anyone needs it. And then we'll be improving the node modules inspector. We'll keep chipping away at that. We're going to try be at more events this year so that people have a chance to actually talk to us about this stuff, and ask us questions and things. So that should be interesting as well. And just roaming around all the different frameworks basically and helping out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest things, that it's like all framework agnostic. No matter what background you have, you can contribute. Probably also to one of your favorite libraries or dependencies you use, but also to just things that help the ecosystem in general.
Yeah, and sort of big task that we're working on at the minute is coming together and creating like some useful metrics to show the progress that we've made. So at some point there will be a blog post to, showcase some of the reduction in size or the speed increase of certain tools and things like this, where we can actually visualize some of these stats and see how we've made a difference. So just like the Storybook dependency tree picture that a few of us have seen,
yes,
we want more of that to show
100%.
That, we have an effect. And mostly downloads from the cleanup side, showing that downloads go down of something that's deprecated and go up of something that's replacing it. But we also need to show like we've improved CPU performance or memory usage or whatever of popular tools. So we're trying 100%. To bring all that together at the minute and put it into a blog post.
Perfect. And I hope also maybe a talk at some conferences as well, or some events, because I mean, that's also a great way to showcase that and get people involved.
Yeah, so I'm gradually getting roped into doing talks.
Some people might influencing, whisper like, "Hey, James."
Yeah,
yeah, you should.
So I think this year I will be doing a couple of talks. So once they become a thing, I'll let everyone know. But it would be really cool to share some of this stuff, you know, and explain what the community has been up to. And, you know, like one of the big things of this as well is that it's such a sort of a highly focused and concentrated group of people from all areas of front end. So, you know, an example is we asked once in the Discord, well, shall we start removing Lodash from loads of projects? Or shall we contribute to Lodash, you know, to make it smaller? And the creator of Lodash just pops up in the Discord and says, please get rid of it.
Amazing.
And it's just the fact that everybody's in there, basically. Most frameworks have like some of their team in the Discord, at least, because we're trying to collaborate with, you know, everybody. We want to improve the stack in general that everybody uses. So that means all frameworks, because it's, you know, it's an initiative rather than just us doing it. We want to help people do it themselves, like improve performance themselves.
Yeah, and as you said, you have people from all different kind of frameworks, libraries, the TC39, Vite as well. Yeah, it's really nice to see that. I would say a lot of people, and especially a lot of maintainers, but also individuals who might stumble into open source the first time, they have a shared goal to make the ecosystem better.
Yeah, definitely. It's really fun.
So once again, people, you definitely should join. The Discord link is, of course, also in the description, as mentioned before. And now the second to last question, James. So as you're leading the e18e initiative, so to say, is there anything that you can share in terms of like how to structure these things very well, how to organize it, and what helped basically succeeding there?
Yeah, so it was difficult initially, you know, to learn how to structure even a community in general. But, you know, with the right core group of people, you at least can get everything through discussion, basically. So most changes we want to make in the Discord, for example, or on how the GitHub is structured or anything like that, we basically just raise it in the Discord, and the regulars, sort of the people that are generally around in the Discord a lot, will give their opinion, and then when we all agree on something, we'll make that change. And, you know, a big thing, especially by Bjorn, has been to push for transparency when we're changing stuff like how the community works. So there's not even really a concept of admins or anything. You know, like I lead it, but there's actually maybe like 5 of us that are technically leads, but we're not like, we don't see ourselves as admins or anything. It's just a big community of people. And we try decide everything as a community rather than dictating it or anything. So I would say if you can get a good enough group that can do that and settle on something, then most of it just works out in the end. But a big thing as well has been, making sure that there's a good documentation of how to get involved and things like that. And so, we've worked quite a lot on putting docs and labels on issues and things like that to make it a lot lower sort of bar for entry. And that seems to have worked well, you know, for new people being able to help.
So that's once again organizing things, basically enabling people to help with as little hurdle as possible, so to say?
Yeah, pretty much. Like initially, it was basically just a big pile of issues that I worked on. You know, I made the PRs and I made the issues most of the time. And so there weren't any labels or anything like that. And it was very difficult for people to get involved because of that. There was loads of work to be done, but it was all stuck in my head or just laying around all over the place. And then a few people in the community came together and sort of made the documentation and all the labels, and we moved some of the projects around and things like that, and just organized it much nicer. And then it's got to a point now where someone can just turn up in the issues repo and pick one and start working on it. So once you've got to that point, it's really easy for people to get started, basically.
Yeah, there's no bottleneck anymore, right? So that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's, again, we're trying to get more people involved in open source as well. So you need a easy entry point so that new people that don't contribute to anything yet can contribute to something as big as Vite, for example, and feel okay about it.
True.
That is a big thing, like where people were hesitant to open PRs and things because there's nobody backing them up and they have no reputation or anything. They're not contributors normally. But again, now there's a whole community behind them. So, they can basically ask for help anytime or anything, and we'll keep track of the issues as well as a community and help out in them and things like that. So it's been really good for introducing new contributors.
Perfect. And I think with that, once again, we can't say it often enough. Check it out. It's a really cool initiative. And the best part is also like there is, as you said before, there is no, let's say, formal, oh yeah, here's my application form, I have to sign up. You can just go there and do it. There are people helping. There are issues to get started. So there is really no hurdle, and you will help, well, the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Then, very last question, James, where can people follow you?
Well, so these days, generally Blue Sky, and my username is the same everywhere. It's 43081J. And that's a 0, and it means nothing. It's random numbers.
Random numbers, is it J for James, I hope?
A J for James, yeah.
Sweet. I love the stories behind usernames. That's so great. Also, of course, I'll link to Blue Sky and GitHub, I guess, as well, in the show notes. James, thank you so much for coming on, talking about e18e in your journey so far. Anything that we didn't cover in time? Anything you still want to mention?
Just get involved, like we're always happy to have people come along and help out. And, even if you want to learn how to do performance stuff like CPU and memory profiling and things like that, just come along and there'll be someone somewhere in the Discord that will help you out, and you'll end up contributing to something probably millions of people use or something like that. So, yeah. Just join the Discord, have a look at the issues repo, come say hi, and we'll be happy to pair with you on all sorts of cool stuff.
Sweet. Then do as James said, and while you do that, of course, don't forget to check out the older episodes of DejaVue. We have a lot of interesting ones in the backlog. For example, last week's open source sustainability panel, or other episodes that are, of course, a bit more Vue focused in details with like Pina or how well signals work under the hood as well. And if this is not your always episode, then just let it run and let it catch up. See you all soon in the next episode, and until then,